What's up, guys? My name's Bryan McGovern. I'm going to be sharing my testimony. Growing up, I always kind of believed in God. I was brought up in a Catholic church, baptized as a baby. I was born in Rhode Island. That's where my dad and his family are from. And we moved out here to Oahu when I was like 8. So I was going into 4th grade. My brother was going into 7th grade. And they put us in St. Anthony's, which is a Catholic school here in Kailua. And it wasn't really anything new, because like I said, growing up, ever since I was like, a baby, we had been going to a Catholic church, so it was all very familiar to me. So once I finished my time at that school, it only went up to 8th grade, and I went all the way through 8th grade. Then I went to a public high school, Kalaheo, and this was my first time ever kind of having freedom from church. When I first started going to that school, at that point I was just living with my mom, and we both kind of just had a mutual agreement, like maybe we don't need to go every Sunday, maybe we don't need to do this. A few years went by, and of course, as a high school kid, you're exposed to a lot of peer pressure, drugs, alcohol, sex, all of that kind of stuff. And little by little, I kind of gave in to all of those, and didn't really seem like a big deal. It usually doesn't when your friends are all encouraging it, and you're just kind of going along with what your friends are doing. You don't even really think about okay, is this actually what I should be doing? And then before you know it, it's like a normal part of your everyday life. Getting what you want as a teenager seems like the most important thing. If my mom tells me not to do something and it's what I want to do, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. Because if not, it seems like the end of the world if I don't get my way. It wasn't until I was maybe like a junior in high school, my mom at the time was dating this guy, and I guess he had mentioned to my mom a church that he goes to called New Hope, and he was encouraging her and asking her to come to church with him and saying that she should bring me and we should all go together. And my mom kept on saying no, it's okay, we're okay, thank you though, and kind of brushed it off. And he kept on kind of trying, kept inviting her and inviting us, and saying oh, you guys are gonna love it, it's a really awesome church. And eventually my mom decided to take me, and we went, just the two of us, without him. And we went to a service at the mall, New Hope Windward, and checked it out. And it was a really, really different experience, because all I ever knew was a Catholic mass, and this was in the movie theater for one, which was kind of weird, but that's just kind of what you have to do. Churches over here on the islands are in schools, cafeterias, movie theaters, just renting the space. Not everyone has the luxury of having a big building. So looking back at it now, I get that, but at the time I was like, why is there a church in a movie theater? This is the weirdest thing. I'm sitting in the movie theater. They turned the whole front into like a stage, and there's this like rock band. There's an electric guitar, bass, full drum set, people singing, these neon lights everywhere. It's dark, and I was like so taken back by it. I'm like, where are we? Like, this is church. Whatever. This is kind of interesting. At least it was engaging. Like, I didn't know what to think of it at first. I didn't know, like, do I like this or do I hate this even more than the other church? Because I was like, what are they doing? This is like, they think they're a rock band. And they sounded pretty good. I don't even remember what songs they were singing, but it was a lot of, like, stuff going on. Lights. I think there was, like, a thin layer of, like, fog on the floor. So anyways, by the time that's over, the pastor came, and I don't know, the way that he spoke to us was just in a very like personable manner. Like, I felt like we knew the guy. And what was so different, I guess, in this style of church, this Christian church, was that I actually understood what he was saying. He was speaking in a manner that was just like easy to understand. You know, he's telling stories, he's cracking jokes, and I was following along with what was happening versus everything that I have ever known before in a Catholic church, where there's just a lot of like ritual things happening, and then when the person gets up behind the podium and reads something, I have no idea what they said. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna actually try to like figure out what they're saying, and then it's just like whew, right over my head. So anyways, my mom and I left that day talking the whole way home about like how cool that was and how we actually both really enjoyed it. The message was something that we each appreciated, and we were like talking about what was said that day, and that was cool. So after that day, my mom and I went back to that same church at the mall a couple times, and that church was called New Hope Windward. And I remember one day, so we lived in the Akahi area, and we were driving past the shopping center, and there was these signs out on the road. It said New Hope Kailua, and I pointed it out to my mom, and I was like, hey, look, New Hope, isn't that the church that we go to? And she's like, oh yeah. And then we went and kind of like followed the signs that had like arrows pointing like New Hope this way, and we ended up following one sign to the next down the road, and we found a church that was a New Hope church, and it was a lot closer to our house. So then that's where we ended up finding ourselves. We went and checked that church out to see if it was similar, or I guess like the same type of church as the one at the mall. And it was a lot different. It was definitely a lot more like intimate. It wasn't at the mall, or wasn't at the movie theater. It was actually like in a church sanctuary. There was pews, which were familiar to me. I grew up in pews. And pew life. So we went to this church, and there were some similar things. Their worship team, you know, was playing a few songs up front in the beginning of the service, and but it was a lot more, I guess, laid back. I feel like these guys were less trying to be like a rock band, and it was more like heartfelt. And I remember listening to the songs, and they had the lyrics up on the screen, and I was just reading the lyrics, and I don't know, I felt like I was really moved in those moments. Like, at the time, I didn't know how to describe it. I didn't know what this was that I was feeling. But now, where I am now, I can look back and say, like, that was Holy Spirit, 100%. Like the atmosphere, what was happening there was God's presence just dwelling among us. And the songs that were being sung, it was worship directly to Him. It wasn't like these members of the church were up there just putting on a show, performing, showing off their musical abilities, which at the time I used to kind of think of it like that. Like, they're kind of, I guess there's a little band that's kind of cool, but it didn't have any like meaning to me at the time. I don't know, little by little I began to really like become intrigued with what was happening, and church suddenly shifted from a thing that I dreaded to something that I was excited about, because I was experiencing something I had never really experienced before. So week after week there would be what I know now to be called like an altar call. He would lead this prayer, and he would offer an opportunity to be saved, basically, to acknowledge your belief in Jesus Christ and to give your life to Him. Each week he would say that and offer that opportunity, and basically say, like, if this is you, if you want to do this, if you want to give your life to Jesus Christ, become a follower of Him and receive your salvation, then everyone had like their eyes closed to raise your hand. And I remember for weeks it was like this wrestle inside where I didn't know if I was saved or not, because I had been baptized as a baby. I had gone to church since I was a little kid. If anyone had ever asked me anywhere along the way if I believed in God, I would have automatically told them, yes, I do. In that moment, I realized this is a choice that I need to make for myself, and I raised my hand and I received my salvation. And then a couple weeks later, they announced that they were going to be doing baptisms, and I knew for sure that this was like the next step that I needed to take. And it was a really beautiful thing. So that was a pivotal moment in my life, and ever since then I know for sure that the way that I viewed God, the way that I viewed church was totally different. But unfortunately, I didn't really allow myself to have a lot of like spiritual mentors. There wasn't a whole lot of people in my life that were like leading me to like the next steps. And there were people, of course, available in the church, but I didn't allow myself to really like open up to opportunities like that. Because like I said, in high school, I was smoking weed all the time. I was drinking, I was having sex, looking at porn, like all these things that I knew in my heart were very wrong and that I shouldn't be doing them, but I liked doing them. And it never occurred to me that these were things that I would need to ever give up. I just thought, like, as long as I can manage it and I don't like let it, I don't know. Obviously some of those things are more like private things, which I thought, like, I'm keeping these private anyway, no one needs to know about this. So I was kind of like one foot in each door for years, actually. And I ended up moving right after high school to the mainland, and I was in what I thought was, like a very serious relationship. I moved across the country for this girl, and we were both very young, like right out of high school, and we're starting, to go to college, and we're living together, and we ended up being together for a few years. And as these years, happened, I found myself not really going to church. I was in a totally new environment. Like at this point now, I was by myself with no family, living in a state where I had no friends. All I had was her, and I put like all of my eggs in one basket. Like I made her the God of my life, not realizing it. and God himself got thrown on the back burner. After so many years together, it became obvious, like, I'm going to spend the rest of my life with this person. I'm going to marry her, and we're going to, I couldn't see my life any other way. I was so, like, tunnel visioned. Years went by, and we were together, and at the time, I thought, everything's great, everything's perfect, this relationship is really good. I proposed to her, we were engaged, and out of nowhere, I find out that she's cheating on me, and she had been cheating on me for a while. And this was like earth-shattering news. So I broke off the relationship naturally, and ended things with her, and was just so like broken. And this led to me questioning God, like, why would this happen? I thought that I was a good person. I thought that she was the one. I thought that this was gonna be like the person that I spend the rest of my life with. And needless to say, this relationship ending, especially the way that it ended, led to me just kind of going down a dark path and seeking fulfillment in all the wrong places. Just went right back into drugs, using alcohol like on a heavy basis, and this just went on, and like nothing changed. Here I am just trying to like heal or like find healing from these things that obviously could never bring healing, but when you're in a position like that, you treat it like it will, and you're just like smoking more, you're drinking more, you're partying harder, trying to forget about what happened. And at the end of the day, you wake up the next day and nothing's really changed. Eventually, it just got to a point where I was so over it. I was so like, so confused and wanting to know, like, why did this happen? Like, what good? If God has a plan for my life and he claims this plan to be good, where is that? What could possibly come out of this that's good? Because in my eyes, that was like the worst thing that could have ever happened to me. I wanted my life to go back to the way things were. So one day I went to church. I found a church over in Texas. It's called Church Unlimited. It was right by my house. It's like the closest church I could find to where I was living. So I just went there. I walked in, and I was by myself, and it was a really, really like much needed, kind of refreshing experience, just sitting there in God's presence. And the message, I feel like it was exactly what I needed to hear at the time. I just felt really encouraged to seek someone out in the church and talk to them. It seemed like all anyone had to offer was substances, basically. Like, oh, she cheated on you, to hell with her, let's go out, let's go to the club, let's go smoke, let's go drink, let's go do this. And they're trying to like use these things, and like, dude, you're single now, like, let's go pick up chicks, everything's gonna be all right, man. You're better off being single anyway. Now you can go like take your pick. And I had tried that, it wasn't working. So when I was there at church afterwards, after the service was over, there was one of the worship leaders I recognized, and afterwards he was walking, and I stopped him and I said, hey man, I know you don't know me, but like, do you have a minute to talk? And he was like, yeah man, what's going on? And I just like laid it all out, and it felt good to just like talk about it and be like transparent. I could see that he saw that I was broken, and I'm just like sitting there crying, telling him what happened, and he's just like crying with me, and like puts his arm around me and just was there for me. And he didn't even know me, and I don't even know his name. Like, we didn't hang out after that. We weren't even friends. I had never met this guy. But I just felt like it was exactly what I needed. So I came back to church, and then there was an announcement that they were having auditions for the worship team. I went and auditioned, and they accepted me, and I ended up starting on the worship team like a couple weeks later. And this was like a totally new experience. Like, at the time, church in general was like a stretch, you know, like in this season of my life, I was going to the clubs and just partying like every other day. So the fact that I was like starting to go back to church was like, that was kind of a big deal already. And now here I am like serving in a church, which I had never done before. So I didn't really know what to expect. I showed up to the rehearsal, and it was just like such a rude awakening because I had not really prepared to be there. They put me on guitar, and I'm like trying to play these songs that I had never heard before, and it was just like a disaster, to say the least. And it wasn't really clicking, you know. I just pictured it as like, I guess I'm a part of a band now. You know, like all these guys were to me was a band, basically, playing songs that were kind of about God. And I didn't take it seriously. It wasn't until one day I was in my room at home by myself, and I was trying to learn the lyrics and learn the melody and just learn this song in general, because all of these songs at this point, they were brand new songs. I wasn't someone who was familiar with worship songs or Christian music. So I'm in my room, I've got my speakers on, and I'm playing this song by River Valley Worship, and it's called No Wonder, and it's just painting like a picture, you know. It's talking about Jesus, you know, with no sin. He's perfect, yet he's just like beaten to death, and he takes on this horrible death for people like me, for people who have sinned and who are like just so far from the perfection that we could be. And yet here he is, the only perfect human being, and he's just like beaten and bloodied. And I'm just feeling so like guilty for that, for the fact that he had to do that for me. And this song is just like painting this picture, and I'm feeling so like brokenhearted, and I'm singing these words, and at the same time just feeling all these emotions of like, why, God? Like, why am I so brokenhearted right now? Why did you let this happen to me? And there was a lyric in the song that said, "See the light tearing through the darkness." And I just got this picture of like, here I am, just engulfed in all of this darkness. And God just like reaching his hand out, and behind him is nothing but light. And it's like the sky is breaking open, and there's like a beam of hope. And I'm just like desperate at this point, desperate for something to change, desperate for myself to feel joy again, for like things to make sense. And I'm like trying to sing these words, and I just begin to cry. I'm like bawling my eyes out, and I just feel this embrace, like God just put his arms around me, and he's just wanting to pull me out of this darkness and show me, like, this is what had to happen, because what he had in store for me was just so much bigger. Like, if I would just begin to trust him, even when it doesn't make sense, if I would just give him a chance to show me what the whole point of all this was, then things would start to make sense. So in this moment, I'm just like, okay, God, have it your way. Like, I completely surrendered, and I'm just like on my knees, crying my eyes out. But it was just the most beautiful, beautiful experience I've ever had in my life, because like the feeling of God's presence was so undeniable. Like, I could see just a picture of my life at that moment. Jesus died for me, and like, that's not something that I need to feel guilty about. That's something that I just need to accept. It was like a light switch went off. That was like the very thing. Just a moment in his presence triggered this true spiritual transformation. That moment was the moment that changed everything. And now fast forward, ever since then, I've been serving on a worship team. As a worship leader, I got involved with the youth because I just saw the importance of needing to invest in the next generation, and the importance of sharing this message, sharing this story right now of like the way that God got a hold of me, because God, he loves each one of us so much, and everyone's got a story. And shortly after that, I felt like God was calling me back home. This is where my mom lives, over here, and I just felt like I needed to come back home now that I had kind of found some closure, found some answers as to why what happened to me had happened. And I'm so thankful that I did, because when I moved back home, that's where the rest of my life pretty much fell into place. And I came back home. My wife, Alyssa, and I reconnected. We had become friends through the church, New Hope Kailua. And as soon as we reconnected, just everything began to fall into place. Shortly after we started hanging out, we were serving on the worship team together, serving in the youth ministry together, just really plugged in at the church that we were at, going to Bible studies together. Just God made it crystal clear that she was the one. And so we got engaged and we got married, and I'm just so extremely thankful, because looking back at it now, like the life that I have now, my relationship with my wife and our son, Ocean, is a million times better and more fulfilling than anything that I had ever known. So that's pretty much my story, and now here we are. My wife and I have a beautiful son named Ocean, and we're still at New Hope Kailua, and we got married in that church, which I think is super cool, you know, that God brought everything full circle. Like the church that I found my salvation at initially came full circle even after moving to the mainland. Now that I'm back here, we got married in the church, and we're still serving at that church on the worship team every single Sunday, and I couldn't ask for anything